the secret letter that Ozzy Osbourne wrote to Steven Tyler before he left, was revealed and left everyone shocked. The envelope arrived at Steven Tyler's Henley-on-Thames home 3 days after the 2025 MTV Video Music Awards, where he had delivered an emotional tribute to Ozzy Osbourne alongside Joe Perry, Youngblood, and Nuno Bettencourt. The return address was written in Sharon Osbourne's careful handwriting, but inside was something that would shake the very foundation of what Tyler thought he knew about his relationship with the Prince of Darkness. A handwritten letter from Ozzy that had been sealed and waiting for over 2 months since his death on July 22, 2025. The letter, dated just 5 days before Ozzy's passing, contained revelations that would fundamentally change how the rock world understood the bond between two of its most iconic frontmen. Written in Ozzy's distinctive scrawl, made even more unsteady by his advancing Parkinson's disease, the pages revealed a depth of respect, admiration, and yes, even envy that Ozzy had carried for Steven Tyler throughout their parallel careers spanning more than 5 decades. "My dearest Steven," the letter began, "if you're reading this, then the madness has finally ended, and I've gone on to whatever comes next. But before I left, I needed you to know some things I never had the courage to say face to face. Things that might shock you, things that will certainly surprise you, but things that needed to be said before it was too late. Oi, if this revelation about Ozzy's final message is as moving to you as it was to Steven Tyler, please consider leaving a like to support more coverage of these deeply personal stories. Your engagement helps us honor these important moments between musical legends." The timing of the letter's arrival felt almost prophetic. Tyler had just performed "Mama, I'm Coming Home" at the VMAs, his first major public appearance since Aerosmith's retirement from touring due to his vocal cord injury. The performance had been deeply emotional for Tyler, who had struggled with his own health issues and the end of his legendary career. To receive Ozzy's words just days later felt like a message from beyond, a final conversation between two warriors who had battled similar demons and faced parallel challenges. What followed in the letter was a series of confessions that would leave Tyler speechless and ultimately reshape his understanding of their decades-long relationship. Ozzy's first revelation was perhaps the most stunning. He had always considered Steven Tyler to be the superior vocalist and performer, a belief that had secretly tormented him throughout his career. "You probably don't know this," Ozzy wrote, "but from the moment I first heard Dream On in 1973, I knew I was in the presence of something I could never achieve. Your voice, that soaring, wailing, impossible instrument, made me realize that while I could be the Prince of Darkness, you were the true king of rock and roll vocals. I spent 50 years trying to match what you did naturally." This admission was particularly shocking given that Ozzy Osbourne was widely regarded as one of the most influential vocalists in heavy metal history. His distinctive voice had defined the sound of Black Sabbath and helped create an entirely new genre of music. But according to his letter, Ozzy had always felt inadequate when comparing himself to Tyler's range, power, and theatrical presence. "Every time Aerosmith and Black Sabbath were on the same festival bill, I would watch you from the side of the stage," the letter continued. "The way you commanded an audience, the way you could hit notes that seemed impossible, the way you made every performance look effortless. It was everything I wanted to be but knew I never could. You were born to be a frontman. I just learned how to fake it really well." The letter revealed that this perceived inadequacy had driven much of Ozzy's most outrageous behavior during the early years of his career. The bat-biting incident, the urinating on the Alamo, the countless controversies that had made him infamous. Ozzy suggested that many of these acts were desperate attempts to create a persona that could compete with Tyler's natural charisma and vocal abilities. "When I couldn't outsing you, I decided to outshock you," Ozzy confessed. "If I couldn't be the best vocalist, I could be the craziest. If I couldn't hit the high notes like you, I could bite the heads off bats and piss on monuments. It was my way of staying relevant in a world where you existed." But perhaps even more surprising than Ozzy's admission of vocal envy was his revelation about the personal relationship between the two men. Despite their public image as merely industry colleagues who occasionally crossed paths at festivals and award shows, Ozzy's letter revealed a much deeper connection, one that had been carefully hidden from the public and even from those closest to them. "What the world doesn't know," Ozzy wrote, "is that we've been in regular contact for over 30 years. Not just the occasional backstage greeting or industry party small talk, but real conversations. Deep conversations about music, about addiction, about the price of fame, about what it means to grow old while still trying to be a rock star. According to the letter, the two had maintained a secret correspondence that began in the early 1990s when both were struggling with addiction and the pressures of superstardom. Tyler's well-documented battles with drugs and alcohol had resonated deeply with Ozzy, who saw in the Aerosmith frontman a kindred spirit fighting similar demons. "When you got clean in the 90s, you called me," Ozzy revealed. "Not through managers or publicists, but directly. You told me that if I ever wanted to get sober, really sober, you would help me. That phone call saved my life, even though it took me several more years to take you up on the offer." The letter detailed how Tyler had become an unofficial addiction counselor for Ozzy during his darkest periods. When Ozzy would relapse or struggle with his sobriety, Tyler would be one of the first people he would call. The conversations were always kept strictly confidential, with neither man's management teams or families knowing about the extent of their communication. "You never judged me," Ozzy wrote. "When I would call you at 3 a.m. completely out of my mind on whatever substance I'd found that day, you would just listen, sometimes for hours. You never preached, never lectured, never made me feel like the failure I knew I was. You just reminded me that recovery was possible, that I could get through whatever I was facing." The letter also revealed that Tyler had been instrumental in several of Ozzy's major life decisions, including his choice to reunite with Black Sabbath in the late 1990s and his decision to move back to England in his final years. Tyler had encouraged Ozzy to repair his relationships with Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward, arguing that life was too short to maintain grudges with the people who had helped create his legacy. "When Sharon wanted to move back to England, and I was being stubborn about leaving Los Angeles, you told me something I'll never forget," Ozzy wrote. "Ozzy, you can't die as an American. You're Birmingham through and through. Go home." That conversation convinced me to make the move, and those final years in England were some of the happiest of my life. But perhaps the most shocking revelation in the letter concerned the 2025 MTV Video Music Awards tribute itself. According to Ozzy, he had specifically requested that Tyler be included in any posthumous tributes, and had even helped plan the performance before his death. "I know you're probably wondering how you ended up performing at the VMA's tribute," Ozzy wrote. "That wasn't a coincidence or a last-minute decision by the producers. 3 months before I died, when we all knew my time was running short, I called you one last time. I told you that when the time came, I wanted you to sing 'Mama, I'm Coming Home' at my memorial. Not because it was my favorite song, but because I knew you would sing it better than I ever could." According to the letter, Tyler had initially resisted the request, arguing that he shouldn't be the one to sing Ozzy's songs at his own tribute. But Ozzy had been insistent, explaining that having Tyler perform would be the ultimate honor, one great vocalist paying tribute to another, even if the world didn't understand the full depth of their relationship. "I also specifically asked for young blood to be included," Ozzy continued. "That kid reminds me of both of us when we were young, all that energy and passion, and complete disregard for what other people think. I wanted him there to represent the future of rock and roll, while you represented its past and present, the torch being passed from one generation to the next." The letter revealed that Ozzy had been following Tyler's health struggles with deep concern, and had been devastated to learn about the vocal cord injury that had forced Aerosmith's retirement from touring. He had wanted to reach out publicly to offer support, but had been convinced by his management team that any statement might seem like opportunistic publicity during Aerosmith's crisis. "When I heard about your voice problems, I cried," Ozzy admitted. "Not just because I knew what it meant for your career, but because I understood what it meant for your soul. Your voice wasn't just your instrument, it was your identity, your power, your gift to the world. Losing that must have felt like losing yourself." Ozzy went on to share his own struggles with the physical limitations that had increasingly defined his final years. The Parkinson's disease, the mobility issues, the gradual loss of the physicality that had made his performances legendary. He described feeling like he was watching his own body betray the persona he had spent decades creating. "The difference between us," Ozzy wrote, "is that you had the wisdom to step away with dignity when your body told you it was time. I kept pushing, kept performing even when I could barely stand, because I was terrified of admitting that the madman might actually be mortal. You were braver than I was." The letter also contained Ozzy's reflections on the evolution of rock music and their place in its history. He expressed concerns about the future of the genre, worrying that the authenticity and danger that had defined their generation was being lost to social media and manufactured controversy. "We came from a time when rock and roll was actually dangerous," Ozzy observed, "when getting on stage meant risking everything, your safety, your sanity, your reputation. Now it feels like everything is calculated and focus grouped. But when I watch you perform, even in your 70s, even with your health problems, I still see that original fire. You never lost the thing that made you special." Perhaps most movingly, the letter contained Ozzy's gratitude for Tyler's influence on his own artistic evolution. He credited Tyler with teaching him that vulnerability could be a source of strength rather than weakness, and that admitting struggles with addiction and mental health could help rather than hurt a career. "You showed me that it was okay to not be the character all the time," Ozzy wrote. "When you talked openly about your addiction, when you showed the world that even rock stars could get help and get better, you gave the rest of us permission to be human. I don't think I ever thanked you properly for that." The letter concluded with a request that would prove to be prophetic. Ozzy asked Tyler to continue performing, despite his vocal limitations, arguing that the world needed his voice and his presence more than ever. "Don't let the voice problems end your story," Ozzy pleaded. "Find a way to keep going, keep creating, keep inspiring. The world needs Steven Tyler, even if Steven Tyler's voice isn't what it used to be. You have too much wisdom, too much talent, too much love to give up now." The final paragraph of the letter contained a revelation that would bring Tyler to tears. "There's one last thing I need to tell you, something I've never told anyone, not even Sharon. You know that song, Mama? I'm Coming Home? I wrote that about you. Not literally about you, but about the feeling I got when I listened to Dream On for the first time. That sense of recognition, of coming home to something I didn't even know I'd been missing. Your voice was my home base, my reminder of what rock and roll could be at its absolute best. Thank you for that gift, and thank you for 50 years of showing the rest of us how it's done." The letter was signed simply, "Your friend always, John Michael, Ozzy Osbourne." When Steven Tyler finished reading the letter, he sat in stunned silence for nearly an hour. The revelations contained in those pages recontextualized decades of his own career and forced him to reconsider his understanding of his place in rock history. To learn that Ozzy Osbourne, a man he had always viewed as a peer and fellow traveler, had seen him as a superior artist was both humbling and overwhelming. But perhaps more importantly, the letter provided Tyler with a new sense of purpose during one of the most difficult periods of his life. Ozzy's encouragement to continue performing despite his vocal limitations felt like a challenge and a responsibility. If the Prince of Darkness believed Steven Tyler still had something to offer the world, perhaps it was true. 3 days after receiving the letter, Tyler called Sharon Osbourne to ask if he could share its contents publicly. He felt that Ozzy's words about addiction, about brotherhood between artists, about the importance of vulnerability and authenticity, could help other people who were struggling with similar challenges. Sharon's response was immediate and enthusiastic. "Ozzy would want people to know," she said. "He was never afraid of the truth, and this letter is the truest thing he ever wrote." The decision to release the letter publicly created a sensation in the music world. Fans and critics alike were stunned by the depth of emotion and the level of mutual respect revealed in Ozzy's words. The idea that two of rock's most iconic frontmen had maintained such a close, supportive relationship while keeping it hidden from the public challenged many assumptions about ego and competition in the music industry. The letter also sparked a broader conversation about the hidden relationships between major artists and the support systems that exist behind the scenes of the music industry. Other musicians began sharing their own stories of secret friendships, informal mentorships, and mutual aid networks that had helped them survive the pressures of fame. For Tyler, the letter became a source of strength and motivation during his own transition away from full-time touring. Ozzy's encouragement to continue creating and performing in whatever capacity possible inspired Tyler to begin work on a solo acoustic project, something he had always wanted to do but had never found the time for during Aerosmith's hectic touring schedule. The VMA's tribute performance, which had already been emotionally significant for Tyler, took on new meaning in light of Ozzy's letter. Knowing that his participation had been specifically requested by Ozzy himself, and understanding the deeper reasons behind that request, made the performance feel like a sacred duty rather than just another television appearance. In interviews following the revelation of the letter, Tyler spoke about how Ozzy's words had changed his perspective on his own career and legacy. "I always thought of Ozzy as this force of nature, this completely unique artist who operated in a different universe from the rest of us," Tyler said. "To find out that he saw me as an influence, that our friendship meant as much to him as it did to me. It's overwhelming and humbling and inspiring all at once." The letter also prompted a re-evaluation of Ozzy's own legacy, with critics and fans beginning to appreciate the vulnerability and humanity that had existed beneath his theatrical persona. The revelation that much of his notorious behavior had been driven by artistic insecurity rather than genuine madness made him seem more relatable and, paradoxically, more admirable. Music historians began to examine the careers of both men with new eyes, looking for evidence of their hidden influence on each other. They found subtle signs that had been overlooked for decades, similar vocal techniques, shared approaches to stage performance, and even occasional musical quotations that suggested a deeper artistic dialogue than anyone had previously recognized. The letter also had practical implications for the preservation and presentation of both artists' legacies. The Osbourne and Tyler estates began discussing potential collaborative projects that could honor the friendship revealed in the letter. Perhaps a compilation album featuring both artists' interpretations of classic rock songs, or a documentary exploring the hidden relationships that had shaped rock music. For the broader music community, Ozzy's letter served as a reminder of the importance of artistic generosity and mutual support. In an industry often characterized by competition and ego, the revelation of such a deep, supportive friendship between two major artists provided a model for how established musicians could lift each other up rather than tear each other down. The timing of the letter's release, just as the music industry was grappling with questions about the future of rock music and the passing of its founding generation, made its message particularly resonant. Ozzy's words about the importance of authenticity, vulnerability, and continued creativity spoke directly to younger artists who were trying to find their own voices in a rapidly changing musical landscape. As news of the letter spread around the world, fans began sharing their own stories of how both Tyler and Osbourne had influenced their lives. The revelation of their friendship seemed to deepen the impact of both artists' work, showing how their mutual respect and support had ultimately benefited everyone who had been touched by their music. The secret letter that Ozzy Osbourne wrote to Steven Tyler before his death had indeed left everyone shocked. Not because it revealed scandal or conflict, but because it demonstrated the depth of love, respect, and artistic kinship that could exist between two of rock's biggest stars. In a world often focused on rivalry and competition, Ozzy's final message to Tyler stood as a testament to the power of friendship, mutual support, and the enduring bonds that connect artists across generations. The letter transformed what many had seen as a simple tribute performance into something much more significant, a final artistic collaboration between two legends, orchestrated by one from beyond the grave and delivered by the other as a sacred trust. In revealing this hidden friendship, Ozzy Osbourne had given the music world one last gift, a reminder that behind all the noise and spectacle, rock and roll was ultimately about human connection, artistic brotherhood, and the endless search for authentic expression. The impact of the letter's revelation extended far beyond the immediate shock of its contents. Within days of its public release, it had sparked a cultural conversation about the nature of artistic relationships and the hidden support networks that exist within the music industry. Social media was flooded with stories from fans who shared how both Tyler and Osbourne had influenced their lives. But now, with a new understanding of the mutual respect and friendship that had connected these two iconic figures, music journalists and critics began re-examining decades of interviews, performances, and public appearances, looking for clues they had missed about the depth of the Tyler-Osbourne relationship. What they found was a subtle but consistent pattern of mutual references, shared themes in their music, and moments of public support that had been overlooked in favor of focusing on their more obvious differences. Rolling Stone magazine dedicated an entire issue to exploring the hidden friendships that had shaped rock music, using Ozzy's letter as a jumping-off point for investigating other secret artistic relationships. The magazine interviewed dozens of musicians who revealed their own stories of behind-the-scenes support, mentorship, and collaboration that had never been made public. What Ozzy did with that letter, explained rock historian Susan Fast, was give us permission to look beyond the mythology and see these artists as human beings who need and give support just like anyone else. It's revolutionary in its simplicity and honesty. The letter also prompted Steven Tyler to be more open about his own artistic insecurities and health struggles. In a follow-up interview with CNN, Tyler revealed that he had been considering retiring completely from music following Aerosmith's touring retirement, feeling that his diminished vocal capacity made him irrelevant in the current musical landscape. Reading Ozzy's words made me realize that I was doing exactly what he had warned against, Tyler explained. I was letting physical limitations define my artistic worth. Here was a man who had struggled with his own health issues for years, still finding ways to create and inspire until the very end. How could I give up when he believed I still had something to offer? The revelation of the letter coincided with several other major developments in the music world that seemed to validate Ozzy's message about the importance of continued creativity and artistic brotherhood. Within weeks of the letter's release, several other aging rock stars announced new projects that emphasized collaboration and mentorship over solo achievement. Mick Jagger announced a new album featuring duets with younger artists, specifically citing Ozzy's letter as inspiration for the project. If Ozzy and Steven could maintain that kind of supportive relationship while keeping it private for decades, imagine what we could accomplish if we were more open about helping each other, Jagger said. Paul McCartney revealed that he had been secretly mentoring several young songwriters for years, inspired partly by conversations he'd had with Ozzy about the responsibility that established artists have to nurture new talent. Ozzy understood something that took me much longer to learn, McCartney explained. Success isn't just about what you achieve, it's about what you help others achieve. The letter also had profound implications for how the music industry approached the narrative of aging rockers and career transitions. For years, the dominant story had been one of inevitable decline, voices weakening, relevance fading, careers ending in either spectacular flameouts or quiet retirements. Ozzy's letter suggested a different model, one where artistic evolution and mutual support could create new forms of relevance and meaning. Music therapists and counselors began using the letter as a case study in healthy artistic relationships and the importance of vulnerability in creative partnerships. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, who had worked with several musicians struggling with addiction and career transitions, noted that the letter provided a template for how artists could support each other through difficult periods. What's remarkable about Ozzy's letter is how it demonstrates that even the most seemingly confident and successful artists struggle with self-doubt and need reassurance, Dr. Martinez observed. But instead of letting that insecurity become destructive, he channeled it into a supportive relationship that benefited both him and Steven. That's a model that could help a lot of people. The educational impact of the letter was also significant. Music schools and programs around the world began incorporating it into their curricula as an example of professional development and artistic relationships. Students were encouraged to think beyond competition and individual achievement to consider how they could support and be supported by their peers throughout their careers. At Berklee College of Music, Professor Gary Burton created an entire course called Artistic Relationships and Creative Collaboration, based partly on the insights revealed in Ozzy's letter. We teach students about technique and theory and business, Burton explained, but we rarely teach them about the emotional and psychological aspects of sustaining a creative career. This letter shows how important those relationships can be. The letter also prompted a re-evaluation of both artists' catalogues, with fans and critics listening to their music with new ears, searching for evidence of their mutual influence. Spotify reported a 400% increase in playlists that featured both Tyler and Osbourne songs, as listeners tried to understand the musical dialogue that had existed between them. Music analysts identified several previously overlooked connections between their work, similar chord progressions, shared vocal techniques, and thematic elements that suggested a deeper artistic conversation than had been previously recognized. Some critics began to argue that understanding their friendship was essential to fully appreciating either artist's work. The timing of the letter's release also coincided with important developments in addiction recovery and mental health awareness within the music industry. Several organizations dedicated to helping musicians with substance abuse issues reported increased donations and volunteer interest following the letter's publication, with many donors specifically citing Ozzy's description of Tyler's support during his darkest periods. The MusiCares Foundation established a new program called the Tyler Osbourne Fellowship, providing peer support services for musicians struggling with addiction. The program paired established artists in recovery with those currently seeking help, creating the kind of supportive relationship that Ozzy had described in his letter. What Ozzy's letter showed us, explained MusiCares Executive Director Laura Segura, was that the most effective intervention often comes from fellow artists who understand the unique pressures and challenges of a music career. We're trying to formalize and expand those kinds of relationships. The revelation also had implications for how the media covered relationships between major artists. Entertainment journalists began to reconsider their focus on manufactured rivalries and competitive narratives, recognizing that they might be missing more significant stories about collaboration and mutual support. Several major music publications announced new editorial policies, emphasizing the investigation of positive artistic relationships alongside their traditional coverage of conflicts and controversies. Ozzy's letter reminded us that some of the most important stories in music happen away from the cameras and microphones, explained Billboard editor-in-chief Hannah Karp. The letter's influence extended into the business side of the music industry as well. Several management companies and record labels began implementing new policies designed to encourage collaboration and peer support among their artists. The model of the isolated, competitive artist was gradually being replaced by a more community-oriented approach to career development. Industry veteran Irving Azoff, who had worked with both Tyler and Osbourne at various points in their careers, noted that the letter represented a shift in how the music business thought about artist development and career longevity. For too long, we've treated artists like they're in competition with each other, instead of recognizing that they're all part of the same community, Azoff observed. This letter shows what's possible when artists support each other instead of trying to tear each other down. The technological aspects of modern music distribution also played a role in amplifying the letter's impact. Streaming platforms reported that the revelation had led to increased interest in both artists' deep cuts and rare tracks, as fans searched for previously overlooked evidence of their connection. Several collaborative playlists created by fans became viral sensations, introducing new audiences to both artists' work. The letter also inspired several tribute projects and collaborative works that honored the spirit of artistic friendship it represented. A group of younger musicians announced plans for an album called Letters to Heroes, featuring songs written as imaginary correspondence between contemporary artists and their influences. The project was directly inspired by Ozzy's letter to Tyler and sought to explore similar themes of artistic admiration and mutual support. Perhaps most significantly, the letter prompted Steven Tyler himself to begin a new phase of his career that directly honored Ozzy's encouragement to continue creating, despite physical limitations. Tyler announced plans for an acoustic tour featuring reimagined versions of Aerosmith classics, as well as new material written specifically for his current vocal range. "Ozzy told me not to let my voice problems end my story," Tyler explained during the announcement. "He was right. My voice isn't what it was 30 years ago, but it's still my voice, and I still have things to say. This tour is my response to his letter, my way of proving that he was right to believe in me." The acoustic tour, tentatively titled Letters from the Edge, would feature intimate venues and storytelling elements that emphasized the personal connections and artistic relationships that had shaped Tyler's career. Each show would include a performance of Mama, I'm Coming Home, dedicated to Ozzy's memory, along with spoken introductions that shared stories from their hidden friendship. The announcement of Tyler's new tour sparked a broader trend of aging rock stars adapting their performance styles to accommodate changing physical capabilities while maintaining artistic relevance. Rather than seeing limitation as an end, many artists began to view it as an opportunity for creative evolution and deeper artistic expression. As the months passed, the impact of Ozzy's letter continued to ripple through the music world and beyond. It had become more than just a revelation about two specific artists. It had evolved into a symbol of how authentic relationships and mutual support could transform both individual careers and entire industries. The letter's final legacy would be its demonstration that even the most iconic and seemingly self-sufficient artists needed and benefited from the support of their peers. In revealing his hidden friendship with Steven Tyler, Ozzy Osbourne had given the music world a roadmap for how artistic communities could support their members through the inevitable challenges of creative life. Years later, music historians would point to the revelation of Ozzy's letter as a turning point in how the industry understood and nurtured artistic relationships. It had shown that behind every great performer was often another great performer offering encouragement, support, and artistic guidance. The letter had made visible the invisible networks of care and creativity that sustained the music world, reminding everyone that rock and roll, at its best, was always a collaborative art form built on shared humanity and mutual respect. If this story of friendship and mutual respect between two rock legends has touched you as deeply as it touched those who knew them, please share it and leave a like. Sometimes the most powerful revelations aren't about scandal or controversy, but about the love and support that exists between artists, even when the world never sees it.